When the Constitution was repatriated in 1982, they had this bill that came out around 1985, and they referred to as Bill C-31. So Bill C-31 sort of, what it does is it defines who is and who isn't a member, and it's all based on a blood quantum. So there were, even though there were guidelines that came out, that stated that the reserves had to put these membership codes in place. Otherwise, membership codes would be, would be more or less given to them. You either develop it yourself or else it's given to you. And but there were guidelines that you had to follow. So it was almost it was sort of an exercise in futility, to try and come up with anything different, because if it didn't follow the guidelines, it was rejected. So the with that that type of document coming out, and once it became law, you had a lot more people coming back into the community, but there was never any funding increases for education, housing, or any of the other programs. So even though the funding that had come in had been capped, you had to deal with a lot more people. And today, a lot of those caps still remain in place, and the population has literally doubled. And so the communities are still trying to survive, with what little there is out there.
So so many people then have ended up living in poverty. They lived on the land, then they began to have minimal integration through the schools and so on, and now a lot of them are living in poverty.
Yeah.
Very close to poverty.
Oh, it is poverty. From where we were, living down in the river bottom, even though we didn't have social services, we were able to live off the land. We were able to drink water, out of the river, and we were trapping and hunting within that that river system. But I remember at one point where one winter we had a fish kill, and it was at that point that even the old people started to realize that the environment was changing. So the backwaters, where we used to do our fishing, every winter they'd be frozen out. So that was sort of like our food was gone. And springtime, once the ice started melting, they would all come up floating dead to the surface. So you could see from that point, living off the land was becoming harder. And today, even if you go down into the river bottom, you find that a lot of the trees, the original plants and animals are gone. And eventually, once the dam was put in, the flooding occurred, and that was actually what drove the last people out of there. So they went from being very self-sufficient to becoming totally dependent. And even though they live on welfare, the average single person has to live on about $200 a month. So it's actually quite, and with that covers everything. So they can't really go back down, because a lot of the plants and that were in that environment are just not there anymore.
What about your own career, though, as a correctional officer? I take it you didn't stay long.
No, I didn't.
What sort of treatment did you receive from your fellow correctional officers, and how basically did you find it?
You had to work twice as hard. You had to be twice as good, in order to fit in. It was one of those things that, because I was already in the military, working by myself, I was able to handle that environment quite well. So there was a lot of, I guess there was a lot of components of it that I really didn't see how they were working, but it just wasn't my position, to go out and say what was or what was wrong with it. So you just sort of have to go along with what with the way the system was structured. But I never saw any correction in it. You know, it was something that I always thought, well, it does what it does, and these guys are here. You know, when I see them out there, you know, they're not doing very well out there. So, you know, for the time being, this may be just, you know, the best that we can do.
How were you accepted as an Aboriginal person in that position? And there were so many Aboriginals in the, was it in the Lethbridge jail?
It was in the Lethbridge system.
How were you accepted differently, do you think? Or resented, maybe?
By the prisoners?
By the prisoners.
By the prisoners, no, they, you know, they actually ran the place. You know, it's one of the things that, like a lot of the other correctional personnel, you know, wondered why certain officers have such a hard time and others get along, you know, quite well. So, you know, it's almost, you know, because of the Aboriginal inmates, they would tell me what was going on. You know, so it was almost like I had many eyes and many ears within that system. So, you know, if something was going to happen, I was on top of it right away. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't because I had, you know, knew it on my own. It's what the inmates were telling me all the time. So it was almost like I had that skill or advantage that none of the other correctional service people had. You know, where they only had what they could see and hear, and that's all they knew. Whereas I had, you know, all the other inmates that were in there were telling me, okay, you better watch this or you better watch that. This is what's coming.